Looks like major changes may finally be coming in St. Louis. Dropped 3 or 4 to the Milwaukee Brewers. Snapped a 7-game winning streak or losing streak on Sunday, but things are falling apart at the seams. Huge series against Los Angeles Angels coming up. But does it even matter? Are Ollie's and Mo's jobs actually on the line right now? We'll talk about all this and more on this episode of D on the Cards. All right. Honestly, that might be the last time we run an episode where we press that. It like actually is a thing. Andrew, coming off the Brewers series, reading the tea leaves, we're gonna get into, and if you're in the comments right now or watching live, we'll get into what we think should happen or will happen, or what should happen, I should say. But Andrew, do you think in this next week Ollie Marmol and John Mozeliak will be out from St. Louis, or do you think this is something that's still going to continue on for a little while?
It depends on how the series goes against the Angels, and we're going into a series in Anaheim against a very bad Angels team, right? Last year, I mean, they've been bad for a while, but last year you have your two franchise cornerstones, Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani is gone. He's up north in LA. And Mike Trout has undergone knee surgery. He's not going to play for who knows how long. Anthony Rendon is out. He hurt himself running to first base. That team is a complete mess right now. And like you look at them, you look at the White Sox, they're kind of all in the same tier, right? And you haven't really been able to beat those teams yet so far. I would say there's 4 teams in the bottom tier of Major League Baseball right now. It's the Rockies, the Marlins, the White Sox, and the Angels. And right now they're 3-3 against those teams. And that's really bad, right? I think the Cardinals are maybe in the tier above that so far. And I would say if you don't at least win the series, if you lose the series like you do to the White Sox, then you have to change something, because then you're just losing these games to these awful, awful teams, right? Like the Angels, every year it's the same story. They don't have any pitching. Can Mike Trout finally get some help? Now you're going into a series, they don't even have Mike Trout. So I don't know like what you can even do. Like, I don't know what the excuses are. You can't really say like, oh, we're struggling, that the guys will get it together. No, this is the series that you really need to go out there, sweep, win, just make a statement, show that you are not completely rolling over on the season. Last year you got swept by the Angels. It was part of that really awful stretch. And yeah, Ohtani and Trout did some damage, but still it was not a good Angels team. So you need to show, right? You need to show up this week in Anaheim. You have to win, and you have to win big, right? Ryan Helsley has still pitched in every single one of the Cardinals' wins. We haven't won a game by more than like 4 runs this year. Can we change that? Like, please? Like, I understand there's been games where we score like 9 or 7 or whatever, but like the pitching hasn't been. But like, just go out there and make a statement, right? The Angels' pitching rotation is one of the worst in all of baseball. Go out there, score 16 runs on them one day. It's tough, but like other teams have done it. So just go out there and win some games.
Yeah, I don't think they necessarily have to win by like the 16 run type thing or score that, but like I think you're right. Like they need to show enough fight to, they at least need to win 2 of 3, if not sweep the Angels. I think if you lose 2 or get swept by the Angels, I think massive changes are coming this week. I also think it would be icing on the cake if some of those wins were like 4, 5, 6 run leads where you don't have to go to Helsley, Ryan Fernandez finishes the game, whoever it is. Like I do think that would help the ownership group, honestly help John Mozeliak decide what he's going to do. It's been reported, but now Katie Wu today said she isn't for sure that Mozeliak's going to be in Anaheim, but it was talked about that Mozeliak was going to join the team in Anaheim this week. And I think there's a multitude of reasons. I don't think it's just to check on Ollie and to figure out like, is he going to be let go or not? I think his comments to Tom Ackerman on Sunday kind of tell me that Mo realizes that if Ollie's out, he's out too. And I don't even think, again, we can all agree to disagree on how Mo is going to handle things and if he's arrogant or whatever. I know people just don't like John Mozeliak right now. I get it, and I'm telling you, I think it's probably time for him to go. It's probably time for him to step away. But the timing matters, because Andrew and I are talking about this a little bit pre-show. We all assume, and I think it's the right assumption, that Chaim Bloom is going to be is a perfect glove fit to be the next Pobo for the Cardinals. It makes too much sense. But the Cardinals' plan wasn't for that to happen in May, right? And Chaim Bloom wasn't expecting, hey, in the middle of May, I'm going to be a president of baseball operations again. He came in intentionally as an advisor because he's spending time with family. He's not even living in St. Louis. I think he lives in Boston right now. That would be a huge shift for him. And we also don't even know for sure if he wants to be that. So let's say Chaim Bloom is like, yeah, I'm good at, or even he's like, hey, right now at this in the middle of May, I don't want to do this, but call me in the off season, I'll be ready, or call me after 2025 and I'll be ready. If that's the case, I have a hard time convincing myself that they're going to let John Mozeliak go and hand over some franchise altering moves to Randy Flores or Michael Gersh or whoever it is, even though we might prefer that. I think they'll say, okay, Mo can handle the trade deadline. He can handle divvying out responsibility. He can handle giving, like, when you cut bait with him, you're cutting the head off. And again, the reason they are cutting bait with him is because they don't think he's the guy to lead them into the future anymore. So I understand that argument. But there's work to be done this season, and I don't necessarily see them just handing that over to someone internally unless they think Randy Flores is the next guy or Michael Gersh is the next guy. And that's a whole other conversation. So I do think there's these background things that we think like, oh, why don't you make the decision? It's like, well, it's not that. If it was just the manager, it's one thing, but I think you're talking about firing a manager and getting rid of your president of baseball operations. And I don't think the Cardinals want to go full scale rebuild. And if John Mozeliak steps away, which would be, he wouldn't be fired, but it'd be kind of an agreement between him and ownership. Hey, we got to move on. And they fire Ollie and they don't have a direct replacement. You're really setting yourselves up for a potential full scale rebuild because who's handling all these important decisions that need to happen between now and July? Who's trading Goldschmidt? Who's potentially trading Nolan Arenado? And if they don't make all those decisions, they hold on to Nolan Arenado to the offseason, hold on to Ryan Helsley, or even if Helsley's like the biggest piece they move outside of Goldie, okay, sure, an interim guy can handle that, but it does feel kind of weird to let someone who knows that they're only in the position for the next 5 months handle some of these franchise altering decisions. And then on the same flip side of it, though, I have a hard time believing they're just going to fire Ollie because I don't think they're going to let John Mozeliak hire another manager. I don't think that's his call. So maybe they promote Descalso, Stubby Clapp. Maybe they promote or bring in convince Yadi to come in for half a season. I don't know what that looks like, but I do think if things go poorly this week, there's a strong, I would lean toward, yes, we're going to see major changes, but then you also have to look at all these other factors. And when I look at all the other factors, it gets a little bit more complicated for me about, okay, well, what's the timing of this going to look like? Because it impacts so many other things. But I do think this weekend, the Brewers just kind of showed the Cardinals that they've surpassed them in every way. The Milwaukee Brewers are what the Cardinals used to be, right? They're the team that they have the Cardinals Devil's Magic. The Brewers have Devil's Magic. They have these random guys that are hitting 800 OPS and are performing, and you look at their lineup and you're like, how is this team any good? And they're doing it. They're getting rid of bigger names and they're bringing in prospects, or they're bringing in guys in the free agency or in the trade market where you're kind of like, is that the right move? And they're performing. Guess what? That's what the mid-2000s Cardinals would do, right? Obviously, the Cardinals always could spend more than the Brewers have been able to, so they would have some bigger names. The Brewers are the class of the National League Central. They're the team who can retool on the fly. They're the team that I need to go back through and look at their record every year. But every single offseason, I kind of think, hey, this is the one that the Brewers are going to fall off. And then they manage to be a playoff team again, or just outside the playoffs. And that's what the Cardinals would do for so long, right? I think the Brewers just showed the Cardinals the Cardinals are the little brother, and they just trounced on them this weekend. And it was horrible. And it confirmed many of the things that fans have been frustrated for a while. Again, I believed in this team going into the year. I thought they did enough to turn around, but I still think this offense is more talented than it's shown, but it's not working. And I like Ollie Marmol. I think he can be a good manager. I wouldn't say he is a good manager right now. I think so, but who am I to say that? It's not working. And at some point, results matter. John Mozeliak, like, you look at his career, he has been a good baseball executive. There's a chance, honestly, there's probably a chance he goes into Cooperstown, it sounds weird, but he's I'm not defending him right now. I'm just saying I wrote a story about this on Sunday, the things that have led to the demise of the Cardinals. And you look at the club from 2008 when John Mozeliak took over to 2015, they went to the NLCS 4 times. They went to the World Series twice and won it once. 4 division titles, I believe. They had like a 57% win percentage during that time. You go to the last 6 or since 2016, the Cubs in your division won the World Series. You've been to the World Series 0 times. You've won the World Series 0 times. You went to NL Central or NLCS once and you got swept by the Nationals and you didn't even belong there in the first place. You've missed the playoffs. If you miss the playoffs this season, you'll have missed the playoffs 5 times since 2016. At this point, all the stuff that John Mozeliak bought for himself, the job security that he bought for himself early on in his tenure as the Cardinals GM and then Pobo, it's gone. And sorry, I'm ranting, so I'm gonna turn it over to you. But I think the other part of this too is that we underappreciate, or we speak. I don't know what the word is here. The impact of ownership on what John Mozeliak does. I think they're a lot more involved in the moves that people want to know. I don't think they just write a blank check and say, "Hey, Mozeliak, you have $50 million to spend this offseason." I do believe that they're a part of these things. I think there's a reason why they didn't go after Max Scherzer. There's a reason they didn't go after Bryce Harper. I don't think it's just because DeWitt didn't want to spend, or Mozeliak didn't want to spend the money, even if he had the money. I think that's a DeWitt driven thing. I think they're the ones who kind of identify, we want people who want to play here and be part of our culture. I think that's part of the reason Mozeliak's had some job security for a while, is because the DeWitt family knows it's not just his fault. We're the ones who also contribute to this. So anyways, all this to say, I think the end is near. I would be shocked at this point that the Cardinals find a way to turn it around where John Mozeliak and Oli Marmol are there in 2025. I think by the end of the season, they're both for sure gone at this point. And I'm not even trying to tell you that they deserve to lose their jobs necessarily. I just think they have to at this point. You have to do that. It doesn't make sense to stay around anymore. Now I'm starting to think it could happen this week. But I think, again, timing matters. I think how this Angels series happens or is handled matters. Yeah, there's just a lot that could happen. So, Andrew, again, I asked you, what do you think will happen? What do you think should happen?
I think at least some accountability needs to be had. And that starts with moves as simple as DFAing Brandon Crawford instead of sending Jose Fermin down when Matt Carpenter comes back, right? I don't know why Brandon Crawford was in the lineup yesterday. He almost cost us the game a couple of times. And it's like, this guy, like, he made a horrible play in the first inning and cost Michaelis a run or two. There was some bad umpiring going on, but Crawford was definitely responsible for at least 1 or 2 of those runs that he gave up in the first, because that was just a terrible play. And Crawford, you brought in as a veteran leader, kind of show Mason Wynn the ropes. Mason Wynn has surpassed him in every single way, and it's not even close. If you want to give Wynn the day off, go to Jose Fermin, who's shown that he can play shortstop, probably better than Crawford can. He can hit the ball better than Crawford can. Crawford has no purpose on this roster other than he's friends with Nolan Arenado. And you know what? It doesn't matter because Arenado's not playing well. So sorry, you don't get that benefit. So start with that. Carpenter's been fine. I've dogged on him in the past, but he's fine. Just leave him there. Honestly, hitting better than like everybody else on the team right now. So
Lead off today, or he needs to hit lead off again today. It's wild.
Is he?
Or I'm saying he needs to.
Oh, okay. But yeah, start with that. Next, go to Turner Ward. He hasn't helped at all. Like the philosophy of hitting, of going the opposite field, it's fine in theory, but they banned the shift for a reason. Let's pull the fly balls more. It's more exciting. You'll hit more home runs. What are we doing with the opposite field philosophy? You have 2 of the best pull hitters in like the last decade, and you're telling them to change it up, and look what you've done to them, right? They finished top 3 in MVP voting 2 years ago. And I don't know if it's because they're getting older. Like, yeah, that plays into it. But I don't think that you can regress that far from top 3 MVP finishing for both of them in just 2 years. That just doesn't make sense. So start with those 2. Then if it keeps getting that way, I don't think Ollie's part of the problem, but I don't think he's part of the solution either. So if you want to show that the fans that you have some amount of like accountability, then get rid of Ollie too. It's fine. I'm not a huge Ollie supporter anymore. I'm not a huge Ollie hater. It just kind of is what it is. And like the manager's job is kind of just to help make sure that the team is playing up to their potential. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could convince me that, because we talked about timing again. Maybe if they don't want to make the Ollie and Mo changes now, maybe you could convince it that you do the Turner Ward thing, because that is like there's a little bit more finality to that than just optioning people. So someone technically did take accountability then, or took a fall. I just think we've moved past Turner Ward being like the fall guy.
I mean, who do you
Because
option? Like Nolan
oh,
Gorman? Like
well, yeah,
I don't know. Like that doesn't
or
make
like
sense.
DFA Crawford. I don't
Yeah.
think that sends a message. Like, I think at this point, if they're gonna make a change that's substantial, it has to be the ripping the band-aid off. I think. I mean, you could do the fire Turner Ward, DFA Crawford. I mean, I don't think you option Gorman. You could do a bunch of random stuff like that.
Well, I feel like you have to do those two because they're past due. Like Brandon Crawford never should have been signed. I don't know what that was about.
Yeah.
And Turner Ward should have been fired like 3 weeks ago. But
I'm thinking more from their perspective of like they're committing to like this is going to work, it's going to turn around. And so I think if you fire Turner Ward, people are like, well, it's too late. That's you should have done that a while ago if you thought that would be the reason to turn it around. So I think they they've held their cards and they keep doing it. And now at this point, the only play they have is to either keep holding their cards or lay them all down. Like, I don't think there's an in between of, oh, we can just let go of Turner Ward and figure this out. I think it's everyone, there's no one at this point. And then I think timing is where things really go off. And I mean, I'm not completely ruling out. And I'm saying this as there is a small chance. I'm not trying to say, let's be optimistic here and think it's going to happen. I'm just, who knows? Yesterday could have been the spark of something. Like maybe Ollie really did get on like light a fire in this team. I don't think that happened. I'm not gonna, and I'm not banking on it. But I think the fact that they finally got a win Sunday and it happened the way it did, it still wasn't great, but it was a little bit encouraging, I guess. I can see them convincing themselves, okay, let's see how this Angel series goes. Oh, we took 2 or 3. Okay, let's see how the Red Sox series goes. Like, I think they might drag this out a little bit longer to see how things go. But again, I think ultimately a lot of this is going to depend on what's the ownership's level of like patience here. I do think business plays a role in this too. Like if they genuinely believe, hey, if we get rid of Ollie and Mo and the fans will start coming back, even if we're losing, just because they're like, hey, we'll support this new version of the team, they might be willing to do it sooner than we thought. Again, we talked about a little bit ago, I think it does matter if Bloom is going to be around or not. Like if he's not for sure, like if he's not ready to take over, it's hard to imagine they're just going to put Randy Flores and Michael Gersh in that position for now.
yeah,
and we
I
just
mean,
got
I
a
do want
comment.
to talk about the comments that DeWitt made. We'll do that later
Yeah.
about fans coming because I thought that was horrible.
Yeah, let's
But
do
like
that.
at this point, you're like, just win the series. If you win this Angel series, instead of being 8 games under 500, you're 7 games under 500. And that's not really that helpful at this point.
Yeah,
You need to go on a legitimate run. You need to sweep the Angels, then like take 2 or 3 from the Red Sox, and then whoever we're playing after that. Oh, the Orioles. Oh, great. That's fun. Like you need to go on a real run. You need to show the league that this team is for real. And whether that's like having a disgusting sausage in your dugout, winning 12 games in a row, like if it works, then just do it, right? Like anything like that's fine. Like as long as I won't have faith in this team unless they go on a legit run. Because if you win the next 8 series in a row, then you'll be back up to 500 and then it'll be like the end of June.
Yeah.
So at that point, I could see someone running away with the division. At that point, it might be too late. So you need to go on a run now. And like, there's really no margin for error anymore. Like it's the same as it was last year. Last year, the team was 10-24. Right now, the team is 16-24. It's like 3 games better, but it's still not good. Like it's still really, really bad. And as Cleveland said, do we think this team has the potential to win 90 games? At this point, no, right? Like,
but that's something they don't have to. There's a third wild card now. And I think that also throws a curveball into this, that I've seen some stuff thrown out there, and it's fair. that there's like 2 or 3 teams in baseball history that have really turned it around and made the playoffs after this. But again, we are 2 or 3 years into this new format of a third wild card. Again, I'm not saying this is how the Cardinals should be viewing it. I'm just
I
internally, they're
mean,
probably like,
do you
"Hey, we're
really
only."
want to be the third wild card just to get like steamrolled by the Braves?
I'm
Like,
not saying
I
you
don't
should.
want to do that.
I agree. I think it's better to just pull the Band-Aid off than to just try and sneak in because this team isn't gonna do anything. But then, here's what they're gonna say. They're gonna be like, "Well, Diamondbacks fans may have thought, well, if we sneak in, nothing's gonna happen either, and look what they did." I'm not telling you that's how it should be. I'm just saying this is how they're gonna look at it. They're 4.5 games back of the wild card, okay? So, like, and the teams above, I know you have to jump a bunch of teams, but it's the Pirates, it's the Reds, the Padres have the third wild card right now. It's the Mets, the Diamondbacks haven't looked good so far. I can see them internally being like, "Hey, we win 2 of 3 here in Anaheim, or we sweep the Angels. We're a couple games out of the wild card. Still the full season to regain the NL Central." I think they could convince themselves that they can stay in the race. I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying I think it's not as quick to be like, "Hey, we're still 7 games out if we would just take 2 of 3 from the Angels." Well, there may be only 3.5 games out of the wild card, and they just have to get to being a low 80s win team to be in a legitimate conversation for it. And I think there's a world where they don't have to set the world on fire and they can get to low 80s wins. It's just how it looks right now. It's hard for me to even believe they're going to be competent enough to do that. But again, we've seen this team, we've seen other clubs go on these huge runs and get themselves into playoff contention. I don't think it doesn't take a huge run to get into wild card contention. It just takes playing winning baseball consistently for a little bit. And they haven't shown that. So again, I am not going to sit here and tell you should believe that's about to happen. But I think that also is part of the reason why they're not going to say in the middle of May, we're going to punt on the season. There's a chance things can happen still. And maybe that they convince themselves that you bring in a Joe Madden, you bring in a Yadier Molina, you do something like that midseason, and it can help turn things around to be a wild card team. Again, we're not talking about winning the NL Central at this point. Like winning a wild card is not it's crazy, but it's not impossible. And they're pot committed right now. It's either and what they don't have to sell right now, right?
No,
Like,
they will wait until July, but like,
yeah. So like they don't have to fire Ollie right now. They don't have to get rid of Mo. If they if the two options are blow it up or stay the course, they can convince themselves, well, let's just like, and unless, like, I think part of the reason the Sunday win hurts the ability to blow this up is it's like it was so bad that it's like you can't do nothing. If they keep having these little blips, so we don't have to believe in it, but they can convince themselves they don't have to do anything for another month or two. So that's where I'm saying I don't think the record and how far out of the NL Central matters as much as it should matter because of the existence of the third wild card. Again, I don't believe this team can do it. I would say there's a 20% chance, and that's generous to say that they can turn things around. I'm 80% on like, hey, it's heading toward a blow up, whether it's this week, whether it's July. Roster wise, I don't necessarily know if it's a full blow up. I think it's more the expiring contracts. It's Goldie or Arenado, and it's maybe a Ryan Helsley. I don't think they fully blow this up, but you never know. So, but I do think you brought up a good point. We should talk about DeWitt's comments a little bit because they seem tone deaf at best. So, Andrew, do you kind of want to summarize a little bit of where DeWitt was going with things?
yeah. So Bill DeWitt the third, who I think is in charge of like everything now at this point. I think
I think
he's
it's
like the
more
president of the
business,
Cardinals. Yeah.
the
So
business side of things.
he was saying that like essentially the fans threatening to boycott the team or whatever doesn't make any sense because they use that they use the revenue that the team generates on the payroll, and basically the team will only be good if fans show up to the games. They'll only spend money on the team if the fans go to the games, which doesn't make any sense to me, right? Like, why would fans go and watch a team that's terrible? I really enjoy going to the games, but I'm making it a point not to go to Busch Stadium this year, with one exception, of course, in August. But like, I don't see the need to go and support an owner who has been very deceptive about the spending, right? Like after Albert Pujols left, they made a statement. They were like, "Yeah, we generated a lot more revenue this season, and we're going to use that on payroll." And they signed Wilson Contreras, and they called it a day. And that was a good signing. I won't fault them for signing Wilson Contreras. Obviously, like he was been our best player this year, and I hope he comes back and we're still in contention, although I kind of doubt that. But they didn't go out and address the pitching that they needed to address. They didn't go out and really do anything else to make the team much better. So like instead of filling one need, which was get a catcher, they did nothing else. So that was one thing. They said the payroll was going to go up significantly this year. Didn't really go up that much. They signed Sonny Gray, Kyle Gibson, and Lance Lynn, and that was kind of it. They haven't been the problem. I don't think they could have foreseen that the offense would be as bad as it was, but still, you're sending the wrong message to fans by increasing the payroll by like $2 million. It doesn't work. So I don't feel the need to support an owner that is going to essentially just lie about what they're doing. And like, I know that they haven't explicitly lied because they have increased the payroll by a little bit. They didn't say how much, but like it's very deceptive. It's not friendly to the fans at all. And honestly, I don't see the reason to support the DeWitt family right now.
Yeah, I would say I'm more the problem I had with his comments was more so that he linked, hey, you guys need to come to the stadium for us to be able to spend money. And that he just kind of was like, hey, like fans are going to keep coming because they understand if they don't buy tickets and they don't buy the food at the concessions, that we can't spend money. It's like, no, fans also understand that, but they're trying to send a message of they want you to change leadership and make real changes. And so that's why they're not coming. And you're just going to make them even more upset if you don't spend money because they didn't come. And you try to sell it as, oh, it's your fault that we're not spending. It's like, that's not going to play well at St. Louis.
I mean, we came to the ballpark in 2022 and you didn't increase payroll by all that much. So like what message are you really trying to send? You pocketed a lot of that.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna say I'm not like someone that's like I'm not gonna go to the stadium because of things like I will still go to games. It's whatever. But here's a list of teams that you currently spend more money than. You currently spend more money than Boston. Boston's a contender. San Diego, Arizona, Seattle, Minnesota, Kansas City, Detroit, Milwaukee, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Baltimore, Tampa Bay. The issue is not the payroll. They can spend more. I'm not trying to tell you that they shouldn't spend more. There is a lot bigger problems than spending an extra 20 million. And so that's where I'm like, when I think about issues with the team, yeah, when you go to ownership, that's one of the issues. But they're, according to Fangraphs, they're the 11th ranked payroll right now. So they're just outside being a top. Okay, there's a pretty big gap between them and the Giants, who are at 10. The Giants are just over 200 million. The Cardinals are about 181 million. Again, the exact numbers doesn't matter, but they are probably around the 11th thing. It's how they spend the money is part of the issue. Now, I wouldn't argue that there's a lot of bad contracts they have, like but Miles Michaelis one, it was a bad deal. Right now, you're paying $35 million a year to Nolan Arenado, who's not producing. And if he was producing, this team's a lot better. And so you spent money well. And I'm not blaming them for having Nolan Arenado. That, like, I'm not trying to say they shouldn't have traded for him, but like that's not the problem. But like part of it's like these big guys they're supposed to be producing aren't producing right now. You do have Goldie on 25 who's not producing. You do have a Steven Matz contract. That's like, it's not a bad deal, but he's not performing, so it is a bad deal. I think it's less about the ownership won't spend right now, and it's more about player development has gone to crap in a lot of ways. When I was doing I think since 2020 or 2019, I was doing this little research project for some of the reasons why things have fallen apart. Only 38% of their starts have come from starting pitchers who are on a pre-arb or arbitration contract over the last since 2019. So that means what is it like almost 60% of their, or a little over 60% of their starts have come from guys who were on free agent contracts. So they make big bucks, right? Part of that's also inflated because they got a crap ton of starts from Drew Rom, from Matthew Liberatore, Zach Thompson, all these other guys who are kind of in the rotation just for spot stuff. Like they haven't had, outside of Dakota Hudson and Jack Flaherty last few years, they haven't had internally developed guys in their rotation. That's a big issue for team building because they need to go out and spend $18 million a year, which, okay, you could have spent money differently, but I'm saying you have to go out and make these weird signings for veteran starters who don't have a lot of upside because you got to fill out a 5-man group. You can't afford to go after Kevin Gospin. You can't afford to go offer Yoshinobu Yamamoto because you have to fill 5 rotation spots. Like that's a big issue. The fact that you have all of these different bats, which I know we've talked about before, each of them is case by case. And like, I get annoyed by it sometimes, but at some point there's like 15 guys now, feels like, that you can name that are on the Cardinals, did not hit, went somewhere else, and are somehow magically hitting now. And it's not just the Randy Rosarina and Lane Thomas and Adolis Garcia anymore. You can also throw Marcell Zuna in there. You could throw Richie Palacios in there now. You can throw Tyler O'Neill in there now. Like, that's an issue. They have lost trades. Like, they gave up Sandy Alcantara and Zach Allen in a deal. That's bad. They've given up Richie Palacios now. They've had to sell low on guys, right? Like, they've held on for guys. They couldn't figure out how to unlock them. They sell them for scraps on the dollar, and then they go produce elsewhere. I think there's a lot bigger issues. And when you go to who are the problem makers, like, the DeWitts are the center of it too, because they're the ones who hire and allow systems to be in place. So, like, if they're managing this team, it's their fault it's not going well. But then you also look at who's the number one, who's the guy who's in charge of the operations from a baseball perspective. It's John Mozeliak. Like, at some point he's got to, like, that change has to be there. So I just have a hard time blaming the payroll when the Rays have figured it out, when the Orioles have figured. Okay, Orioles, they have a bunch of young talent, so that's not a helpful comparison.
The Orioles
like,
tanked for like 4 years, so
yeah. So okay, so they're the one exception, but the Mariners only spent 140 million. They have figured out how to develop pitching. Like, they've done that really well. The Milwaukee Brewers spend just over $100 million. You spend almost $80 million more in payroll. You have almost double the payroll of the Milwaukee Brewers right now, and they're in first place.
I mean, I'll counter with that. Like, most of the teams that you named are not like perennial World Series contenders, right?
True.
The guys who are there every single year, the Phillies, the Braves, the Dodgers, if you really want to go that far, like the Astros, they all run higher payrolls than the Cardinals, don't they?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, but that's here's I say that's why I'm saying spending's not a part of the issue, but the reason it has crumbled is not the payroll. And so, like, if John Mozeliak was maximizing the payroll they had right now, he was maximizing the player development right now, they would be right up there with the Dodgers. They'd be right up there with the Braves. They'd be right up there with the Rangers and any of the teams you want to name the best in baseball.
You have to. I don't think the Dodgers maximize their payrolls, right? They have players on there that you're trying to offload. They have Chris Taylor signed to for the next 2 years. He's horrible.
But they can afford to take risks like that because they spend. So it's not, again, I'm not saying that payroll doesn't matter, but what I am saying is that if the organization had been producing the pitching talent needs to, if their young bats were producing like they need to, what we'd be talking about right now is not should Ollie and Mo be fired. We'd be saying, hey, are the Cardinals finally going to go all in? Because the players on the field are doing well. Mo's making the right trades. He's making the right, again, okay, if you just joined in, I'm talking hypothetically. I'm not saying this is real. But if they were in first place and they were just a tier below the Dodgers, then we could look at the ownership and be like, look at this team that your front office has constructed. Invest in it. Go out and get Juan Soto this offseason. Go get Yamamoto last offseason. Like, go spend big. We're not even at that point, because if you had spent and got Yamamoto this offseason, you still are a terrible team. It wouldn't have mattered. You could have, I mean, the Mets have shown it. Like, they weren't a good organization yet. It all fell apart. The Mets still have the largest payroll in all of baseball right now. And now I get they're a little bit better this year, but like last year they had a historically large one and they were one of the worst teams in baseball. So again, my point is just that I'm not at a point where I'm going to say, hey, if the DeWitts just spend more, this team would be better. There's just systemic issues. And I think part of it is just that Mozeliak's been in that seat for so long. He has been accomplished. Again, he should be a Cardinals Hall of Famer. He could even be a baseball Hall of Famer. I don't know about that one. I have to look more. You're about to find the most water thing. I know it.
No, I'm not. I'm just wondering, like people are talking about some of the Japanese guys. Remember when Miles Michaelis was this neat find from NPB? Like,
yeah,
those were the good days.
Yeah, I mean, they used to do stuff like that and it's just declined. And so it's like, hey, it's time to change. It's time for a new voice to be able to take the reins here, shake things up. We need the Cardinals. St. Louis needs new leadership. They also need to spend more on the team, at least a bit more, but they also need to just spend their money better than they have. But no team spends money perfectly. Again, my bigger thing with the DeWitts is that if they think that fans are just going to keep coming because they know if they don't come, they're not going to spend, that's not going to play well. And it hasn't played well so far.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm like visually lagging hard right now. Anyways, anything else you want to add to that, Andrew?
Yeah, it's just frustrating that ownership doesn't seem to care that much about the product that's on the field. They used to be like super proud of their team. And over the offseason, they were like, "Oh yeah, DeWitt the second or DeWitt Jr. hates winning or hates losing." Maybe he does hate winning, but like he was embarrassed by last season. So like if he was so embarrassed by last season, then what are we going to do this year? Like we need to take some accountability. I don't think Mo will be fired. I really just don't think that they can do that to him. But if Mo steps down in the next like 2 weeks or so, I'll know that this team like truly means business. It would be unprecedented because I don't think I've seen that kind of move happen for a team that had hopes of contending at the start of the season. Obviously, not really anymore if that happens, but um, yeah, it's been really bad, and it all fell apart so quickly because we lost 7 in a row. It's not like it was a slow burn. We were losing series but not getting swept. It was very quick.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Can I play devil's advocate a little bit on the shoot, you just made a good point. Oh, that like the DeWitts didn't like that they let this happen and it shows that they don't think they don't want to win. Like I think they do want to win. And they looked at last season and they said, in my head, again, this is me. This is how I'm looking at it. I'm trying to look at it from their perspective. John Mozeliak's been with the organization for over 20 years. And so in their heads, they're like, hey, he has guided us to success almost every year. He had one horrible year. We're not gonna throw the baby out the bathwater.
Right.
Is that the right decision? No. I mean, actually, I don't think it was the wrong decision. Actually, again, I didn't think John Mozeliak needed fired this past year. They went into this offseason. What were their clear issues? It was starting pitching and bullpen. They needed improved defense. All those things have been better this year. Now it's falling apart now.
I mean,
And maybe again, it's not elite, but like they also weren't going to be able to overhaul that one off season to be elite unless they went and spent like the Dodgers, but it's not going to do that. And I also don't think in St. Louis they're ever going to spend like that. Even if a different owner came in, I don't think like people say we need Steve Cohen. Well, he's also in New York, so you get a little bit different revenue in New York than you do in St. Louis. But again, that's not the
well, Steve Cohen operates his organization as significant loss. I think that's been
but also it would be an even bigger loss in St. Louis,
right.
probably. Again, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's not the point. The Cardinals win.
I just wonder, because the DeWitts want attendance to be back up. Attendance dropped last season.
Yeah.
I don't understand in what we're like. I'm not well versed on like which players are marketable or which are not. Like I know obviously there was one guy on the market that you weren't going to get, but like Sonny Gray, Lance Lynn, and Kyle Gibson. I love Sonny Gray, but genuinely, other than like Sandy and like the 10 other Sonny Gray fans out there, how many people is Sonny Gray bringing to the ballpark? Because I saw the clips of Sonny Gray's first start. There was nobody there. And this was before the team had completely bottomed out. And it's like, who's coming to the ballpark to see Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson pitch? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You need to go out there, find someone who's like exciting to fans. Like, go get Tyler Glass now. Go get, like, now I'm just naming the Dodgers roster because I like them so much, but like, they're so exciting. But like, I'm traveling to go see the Dodgers next week because I think they're really exciting. Like, no one is like, ownership either has no idea what's going on and genuinely believes that Sonny Gray is going to put fans in the stands. But I think the DeWitts are smarter than that. And they're not putting their money where their mouth is because like Sonny Gray legitimately will not bring that many people to stands. As good as he pitches, he's just not, he doesn't sell that well.
Yeah. So real quick, again, awesome turnout today. So really thankful everyone who's in the stream or if you're watching later for checking out this episode well. Again, subscribe if it's your first time watching, or if you've watched before and you want more Cardinals content. We usually have 2 episodes a week. We have a special episode that we're working on right now that we're hopeful to produce and post soon. It should be really cool. Anyways, we do Cardinals content all the time over here. And potentially if there's some big moves that happen randomly, we go live and we react in real time. So subscribe, like the video now also if you're watching as well. That really helps the channel out a ton as well. And share if you can as well. But back to your point, a couple things. One, ticket sales. So you know how they do the announced
there's no shot there's that many people at the game.
But that's ticket sales. And so that's why in this point in the season, they're making the money because they sell a lot of those tickets before the year starts. We saw last year at the end of the year, people stopped going to the games, and they're doing this deals now because they know it's coming with how things are trending. They're trying to sell as many tickets as they can. They're gonna hit that financial loss later this season. So I think that's part of the reason they think like, and it's fair. Like if the Cardinals are a winning team, like if they were 5 games above 500 right now, I think the stadium would be packed. I don't think the names would matter as much. But it's the fact that they're doing so terrible. So I don't
Right.
think they're like, hey, we have to fire people right now to get people to come to the games because they've already sold these tickets. It's not a huge deal. They can wait it out a little bit longer because if they fire people, again, it is more likely that it is 90% likely that they're heading toward a retool and not some like at this point in the season, like they don't have enough time to turn it around, in my opinion, really. So they're not like banking on, hey, we're gonna bring in a new manager and this whole and new president of baseball operations. We're gonna make the playoffs. It's like, hey, we have to turn the page on this era, get ready for 2025 and roll. So that's where part of that too. But back to my original point too, that I think again going into this offseason, I thought it made sense. You kept Ollie and you kept Mo, you needed to figure out the starting pitching. And what was the thing everyone was talking about going into the season? It
It was the
wasn't,
rotation. No one
yeah,
cared.
it was the rotation. It was the bullpen. And I get that it's bad right now. It's been worse the last few games. I'm not trying to tell you that it's a perfect, but most of this season, it has been better than we thought. It has been exactly what they needed. If this offense was anywhere near where it was supposed to be, this team would be in first place or right around it right now, would be a winning team. I get that some people said, "Hey, look at the season totals," and that's fair. Like they fell off in the second half, but I think it was really easy to look at, hey, they sold and they waved the white flag, said they were done with 2023. So some people kind of checked out. Nolan Arenado had a back injury. There was other multiple people at the IL. You had Jose Fermin, and you now like what's that? The infielder, the would
Yeah,
start with last name
I don't
Q.
even
Like
want to
there's
attempt to
all these
remember that.
random guys getting at bats where it's like, okay, like of course your offense is going to regress. We'll wait till 2024. And then, I mean, and even for the people that are pessimistic about the lineup, because there were some people, it's not like everyone was bought in. I was bought in. You were bought in. Sandy is bought in. Most people are bought in. But there are people who said, hey, this lineup isn't as good as we think it is. Okay. No one thought it was this bad. Don't try to tell me you thought this lineup would be this bad. Don't try and do it. Like, if anyone try, whenever someone says, see, I told you so, I'm like, you could tell me so. They weren't a top 10 offense, but they certainly weren't the 29th ranked offense in all of our eyes. Like this is wild what's happening. And so again, I think you can justify going into the season saying, hey, you fix the starting pitching, you fix the bullpen, this team can win again. It doesn't mean it's a World Series contender. That's a whole other conversation. They need to get back to that. But I think there's a reason they went into the season how they did. And then again, it wasn't if the starting pitching failed, if it fell apart and it's early May, I think we would have seen changes already because it's like, hey, it's the same issues again. You guys can't figure it out. It's time to go. I think the reason they were able to keep saying patience this time is it's like you look at it, it's like, okay, Nolan Arenado has to start hitting, right? Paul Goldschmidt, he might not be an all-star again, but he's got to be better than this, right? Lars Nootbaar, Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman, Brendan Donovan. These guys are going to hit, right? And then no one did. It was just Wilson Contreras. So I think that's how we got to where we're at right now, where it just fell apart so much and we haven't seen changes. And now I think internally they're like, okay, do we make a change? And if so, when's the right time? How do we do it? It was the perfect storm. If they were bad, if you told me we'd be talking about them blowing it up right now, I've been like, man, Lance Lynn and Miles Michaelis, Steven Matz, and man, Sonny Gray was good, but he was not good enough. And the bullpen was just terrible blowing leads. And it's like, wait, what? Only Wilson Contreras has a good OPS on this team. Jordan Walker's in AAA again. Paul Goldschmidt's one of the worst hitters in baseball. Like, I would have been like, how is that even possible? I would have not put that in the range of outcomes at all, but it happened. And
Right. And I'll address one thing about attendance real quick because like I've gotten comments that people take what I say out of context and say that I'm like a fair weather fan or whatever. I'm not. If this team is direct and they're like, hey, next year we're gonna let the kids play, I'll go to the games. If they finish in fourth, I don't really care because if it's Jordan Walker, Victor Scott, Mason Wynn, and they're saying like, hey, if we contend, then great. But we're not really trying. We're kind of retooling this season. Then I'll go. Like it's not about what the team is doing on the field. It's about the messaging from the ownership, and it's less about the players. Because I'll support the players, like regardless.
yeah. And at this also too, like I'm not gonna tell people go to the
Right.
stadium. I'm not gonna tell people not like whenever I see these boycotts of like, don't go to Cardinal games, you're the worst person ever if you go. It's like, let people spend money
Most
how they
people,
want to spend their money. If they
yeah,
enjoy going to the ballpark and they enjoy watching baseball, great. Like, stop trying to hate on other people
right.
enjoying life. And if someone does not want to watch baseball because they have better things to do than to waste their time watching this team fall apart and they're not lunatics like us, good for them. Go outside,
I'll still
spend time
watch
with
the
your
team every
family.
day on TV, but I will not go
Yeah. I
to the
I
games.
will go to as many games as I would have anyways, but that's me, okay? I don't like I'm not telling other people they need to do that. If I'm one of the 3,000 people there, it'll be awkward, but like I'll be there for that game. I'm not gonna go. I don't
Yeah.
go to every game.
And
But
hey, I'll be there for 3 games in August, and DeWitt family, you wanna know why I'm going to those games? It's not because of any of your players, okay? So maybe get someone exciting.
oh man. I don't like but here's the thing too. Like I know that the Cardinals love their stars and they love Hall of Famers and stuff, but I think the city again, I
It's
don't
all
want it to
games.
be. Yeah, and I don't want it to be like Tampa Bay where every single year, like, okay, are we going to keep these players or not? Like, because they have enough payroll not to operate like that. But heck, if they have an overturn every 4 years or so, where it's basically a new team, like, I don't think fans are going to be like, oh man, they let go. Like, people get mad when Matt Carpenter's extended for too long, when Miles Michaelis is extended too long. It's when you let go of true icons. Like if you did a Mookie Betts thing or let Bryce Harper walk, that would be an issue with St. Louis. Because like, how are you not bringing back this
We
guy?
haven't had one of those since Albert Pujols, and him
Yeah.
leaving was honestly not a terrible thing because that contract was really bad. So,
Yeah, I'll always wonder how he would have played if he stayed in St.
right,
Louis, but like all we can operate off of is what happened and he declined. So, and we got this perfect ending with him too, which is
right. So, like,
super
I don't
fun.
care. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. But I mean, you go back, it's like the DeWitts have said that not signing Max Scherzer was one of the biggest mistakes they ever made. And it's like, yeah, pretty big mistake, dude. Like, I don't know why you didn't want him. And
You
like
signed Kyle Gibson and
literally
Lance Lynn because they wanted to be here, and it was like, oh, well, you had
Max
this other
Scherzer
guy.
wanted to be in St. Louis. He said, if you get in the ballpark of the offer the Nationals gave me, he didn't say top it. He didn't say match it. He said, hey, if you can get in the ballpark, I'm coming to St. Louis. And they didn't even contact him. Didn't even contact him. Bryce Harper sat out there forever. Anyone in baseball could have had him. There's nothing that says Bryce Harper wanted to come to St. Louis, but I'm going to be honest. The Cardinals put out the same offer he got from the Phillies in February. There's I don't know where he goes, maybe Philly, but if
Phillies were
they
not a winning team back then.
yeah, and but it's a big market. Philly's and
Right.
it's East Coast, people like that. But again, they could have went on and gotten that. Like, there's just things they could have done. And they, I mean, and but then there's also the weird parts where they did try to trade for Giancarlo Stanton. Good thing it didn't work, but they tried to take that contract on. They tried to sign David Price and Jason Hayward. But I think the lessons that DeWitts learned from that was, oh man, we should not spend money like that because it could go super poorly. Rather than, oh man, we dodged a bullet there, but doesn't mean we shouldn't go after freaking Juan Soto. Again, like now that trade, I've been very much like that was a good move not to make the trade. I mean, you're looking at the talent they would have given up now. I'm not again, it's so early. I'm not giving up Jordan
Like
Walker. I think
Jordan
it'd be
Walker.
better.
Oh
But
no.
actually, I okay, never mind. I still believe it would have been terrible because I think they're in the same situation they are right now with Juan Soto. Maybe they win it in 2022, which would have made it differently. I doubt that though. And
I mean,
they'd
the
be
offense was the issue in that series against the Phillies, and then the Phillies
yeah,
went
but
all
I
the
don't
way.
know if
So
one bat changes it.
it's
But
Juan
maybe it does a little bit.
Soto.
Yeah, I'm just
So I don't
again,
know.
I we'll see. I don't know. But beside the point. But like they should be an organization that this offseason they're like, hey, Nolan Arenado was kind of declining. Paul Goldschmidt's coming off the books. Oh man, a Juan Soto would fit perfectly in the middle of our lineup. We should go after him in free agency. There's
They're
no
not.
shot. There's no shot. They're not
I've
going
heard
to.
that Juan Soto might get more than Otani, which is
Oh, and AAV, I've heard that.
yeah.
Yeah. Which I think is fair. He's awesome. Which also, again, if he gets that much money, it's like, okay, he's probably going to the New York teams or LA. Like, not
Right.
LA, but
No,
that
no,
makes sense.
no,
But
right.
like, but again, it's like when there's a guy who wants to come there and you didn't do it, and it's not Lance Lynn, it's Max Scherzer, that's a problem. Or when it's like there's a bargain out there, Bryce Harper was a bargain. Now, I think front offices have learned from that mistake. They're like, hey, maybe when a guy is 25 years old in free agency, he's already won an MVP, maybe we should sign him. Which is why Corey Seager, which he hadn't won an MVP, but Corey Seager got big bucks, and Juan Soto is going to get the big contract. Trey Turner, like these guys are getting the big contracts now. You're not really seeing these elite talents get signed for less than they deserve. Anyways, we're ranting. I told you the money spending wasn't the problem. Now I'm ranting about how it's part of it. It is part of it, but the bigger issue is that Randy Rosarena's on another team. Jack Flaherty's on another team is kind of part of the issue, but like Sandy Alcantara's on another team, Zach Gallen's on another team. The guys you have now aren't performing. Even guys that aren't that level, but like Tyler O'Neill goes to another team.
I mean, Jack Flaherty, if you had kept him, he would be on a veteran contract, so it's not really an issue.
But like the talent is succeeding elsewhere. Jordan Hicks didn't figure it out in St. Louis, but figured it out with the Giants. Like that's all issues. So again, I think this Angels series could be the end of the John Mozeliak era. I'm not saying it will be, but if they get swept or it looks really bad and they lose 2 games, I think I lean toward the change is gonna happen. Not for sure. I'm not gonna say it's definitive by any means. I think there's a world they fire just Ollie, but I have a hard time believing they both don't go at the same time. But I do think by the time we're in this coming off season that major changes have come in St. Louis, and I don't know if it's before the deadline, after. I think Chaim Bloom's presence matters for some of this, but yeah, no, we didn't even preview this Angels series, but I don't think we even need to.
The Angels and the Cardinals are very similar in all the wrong ways.
In all the wrong ways.
Like, right, like in 2022, they had these 2 superstars, and it just didn't work out. Their pitching wasn't great, and like they're so similar. Like they both have an inability to develop pitching talent. They have some superstar players that are declining, and it's just like, I don't know. Yeah. That ownership group too, kind of similar if you look at it. But
yeah, I think I can't remember where I saw it, but someone made the comparison. I think it's a really interesting one. The 2007 Cardinals to the 2024 Cardinals, and it's like, hey, terrible season. You had a terrible first month offensively. You have an aging star who just lost all their talent in Paul Goldschmidt, and it's like Jim Edmonds had the same thing happen to him that year. You have an aging.
I really wouldn't care if we won the World Series last year, is what I'll tell you right now.
Yeah, so that is the major difference. But I'm saying in terms of like, oh, sorry, I got a weird text. I thought maybe something was happening, but maybe not. Yeah,
was that a jab at Jim Edmonds?
It was unintentional. No, I literally got one. Oh my gosh. Okay. Like, removing the fact that they just won the World Series, I'm not trying to say that's similar, but I'm saying like the vibes right now. Also, like they were a consistent contender for a while. Like, I mean, I know that 2006 they won the World Series. 2005, 2004, 2003, like those early 2000 teams were awesome. So you're not coming off that kind of era. But I just think like you do see some of the writing on the wall with some of this. But part of the reason you trusted the player development back then, right? You trusted they'd figure it out. But again, they fired Walt Jocketty. They got rid of him, and part of that's because they wanted to go with Jeff Luhnow and John Mozeliak instead, which was the right call. And then they lost Jeff Luhnow, and maybe we can get into a big oral history about the demise of the Cardinals right now, but I don't think we have time for that. So I think we're kind of wrapping things up mostly. If there's anything lingering in the chat you feel like we haven't addressed, let us know. Appreciate the support and appreciate you coming out. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast already, we'd really appreciate it. We really appreciate the support. Like the episode as well, really helps us as we're going as well. Also, plug I meant to do this earlier for Note News, which is a new podcast in the podcast network we've got going here. Andrew, do you want to tell us, our listeners, a little bit about Note News?
Yeah, so Note News, a little play on Newt News, which is, I can't believe we were called Newt News at this point anymore, but they're covering the Blues for us. Pretty similar format of content. We got 2 really good, very knowledgeable, very talented guys over there working on that project. They'll be giving some takes, I think once a week during the offseason is what they said. And hey, I mean, I listened to their first episode. I know nothing about the Blues. My 2 takeaways are: 1, the Blues have a better future than we do over here. It sounds like they know what they're doing. They have a young core that they're excited about. And also, apparently they have 2-way players in hockey, so I'll have to go check that out. So that'll be fun. But yeah, go give it a subscribe. Note News Podcast, just put it in the search bar on YouTube and give them a watch, give them a subscribe. You got great content over there.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And I'm also not really a big hockey guy, but like I really enjoyed the first episode and looking forward to listening to them more as well, John and Alec. And yeah, figuring it out. Maybe I'll have to get into Blues hockey with how the Cardinals are lately. But no, I do think once we get through this weird rough patch, like, and not saying like that it's just going to last a few months, but I think once we figure out where, gosh, holding Mo's water. I think once we figure out the direction, the future of this organization, and there's a new president of baseball operations, there's probably a new manager. I think it'll get exciting again, and we can talk about young talent. We can talk about where things are going. But right now, it's the end. Like most things in sports come to a terrible end. The Cardinals are not the 90s Bulls, but like even that ended poorly. And like, well, and you can watch a documentary and it's like, okay, well, a lot of that was management's fault being dumb. But like at some point, like you look at the Houston Astros right now, maybe they turn around, but it also kind of looks like an end of an era is happening there. Theo Epstein is like, oh my gosh, he's the savior of Chicago, but like he left town right before things fell apart. And as things are falling apart, like rarely do things come to a beautiful end. Again, John Mozeliak's era is going to be controversial. There's going to be a lot of feelings about it. He's done a lot of good, but the last few years have been poor. We're ripping the Band-Aid off, and then we'll see what the next future of Cardinals baseball looks like. And they've gone through stretches before, right? It hasn't, like, I think sometimes we act like the Cardinals just have won every single year and never had a losing season in their history. It's like they've had transitions of eras before. I believe this is an organization people are going to want to work for. Like, it's like, hey, if I win in St. Louis, I'm like a legend. People love me. And it's a market that's going to care and invest. Like, why would I go to Milwaukee? I want to go to the St. Louis. But they got to change things before people want to come here. So in terms of like front office and coaching, and it's like, okay, then do what you do as the Cardinals. You develop young talent. You make the new era go. I like a lot of the young players they have now. That's why I go more toward this is going to be a retool rather than a full-scale rebuild like the Chicago Cubs of old or the Houston Astros or Orioles, but we'll have to see. So again, thanks for listening today. We'll be we might have an emergency episode later this week depending on if anything crazy happens. Otherwise, we'll probably
spilling Mo's water.
Yeah. Are we still going live Wednesday?
I don't know. We'll see. I'll be in Anaheim. I'll be on my way to the last game, and maybe that'll be Mo's last game too.
Yeah, we'll see. So we might go live Wednesday. We'll figure out how this later in the week works because of potential some things changing and dropping. If not, we'll for sure be live next week as well. Really appreciate you watching and subscribing. Again, subscribe if you like this podcast and want to get more Cardinals content. Like, it helps out the channel a ton. We really are just looking forward. We're looking forward to seeing what happens. Okay, change needs to come. I think it's coming. We'll have to see. Thanks, Cardinal Nation, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.